Have you ever looked around your home and thought, maybe it's time. Maybe I shouldn't be living alone anymore? It's a thought that sneaks up on many of us as we get older. The stairs feel steeper, the nights get quieter, and the idea of being closer to our children, to family, feels more comforting than ever. You start picturing the Sunday dinners, laughter in the kitchen, the grandkids running through the hallway. And when your son or daughter says, "Mom, why don't you just move in with us?" It can sound like a beautiful offer wrapped in love and good intentions. But here's something most people won't tell you. That very move, the one that feels like it's bringing your family closer, can also be the one that silently unravels everything you've spent a lifetime building. This isn't about blaming anyone. It's not about accusing your kids of anything either. It's about protecting you. Because once you've made that move, it's not so easy to go back. And I know what it's like to think, that would never happen to me. My family's different. But thousands of older Americans every year find themselves in heartbreaking situations they never saw coming, all because they moved in with their kids. So today, we're going to talk about something a little uncomfortable, but absolutely necessary. We're going to talk about the 5 serious risks of moving in with your adult children, especially after 70. Not because it always goes wrong, but because when it does, the damage can be life-altering. And most of all, because you deserve to spend your later years with dignity, peace, and choices, not with regret. Let's start with one of the most painful risks that catches people off guard: financial disaster. You see, when you move in with your kids, it often starts with something simple. Maybe you're selling your house to make the move easier. Maybe you're offering to pitch in on bills. Maybe your child suggests combining accounts for convenience. It doesn't seem like a big deal in the moment. After all, they're family. What could go wrong? Let me tell you about George. He was 73, a proud, independent widower living in Vermont. He had a cozy house, a well-tended garden, and a retirement he'd planned carefully. But when his daughter Lindsay invited him to move in with her family in Michigan, it felt like the right thing to do. "You'll save money, Dad," she said. "You'll be close to the grandkids. We'll take care of each other." So George sold his home of nearly 4 decades, packed up his belongings, and moved 800 miles away. The $220,000 from the sale of his house sat in the bank. But little by little, it started disappearing. There were unexpected expenses, home renovations, a loan to help Lindsay's husband's business. And suddenly George realized he had almost nothing left. The worst part? There was no paperwork, no plan, no legal agreement, just trust. And that trust had vanished. Now, I'm not saying Lindsay was out to hurt her father. Most of the time, this isn't about malice. It's about blurred boundaries, pressure, and miscommunication. You're under the same roof, and suddenly your money isn't just yours anymore. It becomes a shared resource. And the moment you lose track of where it's going, it's usually too late to get it back. Even if your kids love you dearly, that doesn't mean they'll handle money well. Even if they say, "You don't need to worry about rent," that doesn't mean you won't be guilted into paying for other things: groceries, school fees, home repairs. Before long, your life savings become household funds. And let me tell you, trying to undo that situation once it's happened is like trying to untangle a spider's web. Frustrating, sticky, and nearly impossible. The safest thing you can do? Keep your finances completely separate. Don't put your name on a joint account. Don't transfer property unless you've spoken to a trusted elder law attorney. Don't hand over control of your money, even temporarily, without full legal protection. Your independence isn't just about where you live, it's about what you can still choose, pay for, and protect. And that brings me to the second risk: losing your independence. Not financially this time, but in your day-to-day life. Have you ever had to ask someone if you could turn the TV up? Or felt bad about making coffee because others were still sleeping? It might seem small, but these little moments chip away at your sense of self. Suddenly, your schedule isn't your own anymore. You're adapting to someone else's home, Someone else's rules, someone else's pace. Harold knows exactly what that feels like. He was 75 when his daughter Rachel invited him to live in her finished basement. She meant well. She truly did. She worried about him being alone, driving himself to doctor's appointments, cooking his own meals. So she welcomed him into her home. But Harold quickly realized something. He wasn't living with them. He was living under them, literally and emotionally. He had to ask permission to invite a friend over. The grandkids came in and out of his space whenever they wanted. He wasn't comfortable cooking at certain times because it interfered with the family's routine upstairs. He couldn't watch the news at night because the baby was asleep. He wasn't lonely, but he wasn't free either. And that loss of freedom, it took a toll. He stopped calling his old friends. He stopped going out. He stopped doing the crossword in the morning like he used to. Slowly, his spark started to fade. His doctor eventually diagnosed him with depression. You see, when we talk about independence, we're not just talking about the big stuff like driving or working. We're talking about the little things: when to eat, what to wear, how to spend your afternoon. These daily choices are what keep our minds sharp and our spirits alive. When you give them up, even for the best reasons, it changes you. You might think, but I don't mind sacrificing a little comfort for the sake of family. And I get that, truly. But the question is, how much of yourself are you willing to lose? Because once those small freedoms are gone, it's hard to get them back. That's why it's so important, if you do want to be near your children, to consider other options. Maybe it's a small apartment in the same neighborhood. Maybe it's an independent living community where you can have your own space, your own routines, your own front door. Being close doesn't have to mean being under the same roof. You've spent your whole life making decisions for yourself. Don't let go of that now. And if you're already feeling the pressure or the guilt of having this conversation with your family, take a breath. You are not selfish for wanting to stay independent. You are not a burden because you want your own space. You are protecting your peace, your health, and your dignity. Now that we've talked about finances and independence, let's take a moment. Because what we're going to talk about next isn't just about money or routine, it's about something deeper, something more personal, something that touches the very heart of why so many of us hesitate to speak up until it's too late. Now, I know that's a hard thing to even think about. These are the people you raised, the ones you sacrificed for, the ones you'd do anything for. But when you move into their home, no matter how loving they are, something shifts. And that shift can quietly wear down even the strongest family bond. Let me tell you about Susan. She was 74 when she slipped on her porch and fractured her wrist. Nothing too serious, but enough to make her daughter Heather worry. Heather said, "Mom, you shouldn't be alone anymore. Just come stay with us. It'll be easier for everyone." So Susan packed up her little 2-bedroom condo and moved into the guest room at Heather's place. At first, it felt like a blessing. Movie nights with the grandkids, shared meals, and someone to help with errands. But within 3 months, everything changed. Susan started noticing the little sighs when she asked for help, the irritation in Heather's voice when plans had to change around her doctor's appointments, the quiet tension at the dinner table when the grandkids were reminded, yet again, to keep the noise down because Grandma was resting. Heather's husband started working later. The grandkids avoided the living room where Susan liked to sit. And Susan, who used to call Heather every day just to chat, suddenly felt like a stranger in her own family. 9 months in, she moved out to a senior apartment complex across town. But something was lost in those months. The easy laughter, the closeness, the friendship they used to share. Now, 5 years later, they rarely speak. And Susan hasn't seen her grandchildren in over 2 years. And I wish I could say that story was rare, but it's not. The thing is, when you move in with your kids, the boundaries blur. Are you the parent, the guest, the roommate, the caregiver, the one being cared for? No one quite knows. And when roles get confused, resentment starts to grow. Your way of loading the dishwasher is different. Your bedtime is earlier. You like the house warmer. They like it cooler. It all adds up. You see, relationships thrive on space, on balance, on visits that end with a hug and, "I'll see you next week." When you live under the same roof, the things that used to be charming, your stories, your habits, your routines, can start to feel like friction. And that's when the emotional distance sets in. So before you trade your peace for proximity, ask yourself, how much is your relationship with your kids worth to you? Because if it's precious, and I know it is, then maybe preserving that relationship means keeping a little distance, visiting often, having dinners, going to the grandkids' events, but still having your own space, your own quiet, your own life. And it's okay to want that. In fact, it's wise. Now let's talk about something even more serious, your health. I know, it sounds strange. After all, isn't moving in with your kids supposed to help your health? Less stress, more support, someone to check in on you? That's what most people think. But for many older adults, the opposite is true. Take Leonard. He was 76, living alone, but managing just fine. A little arthritis, some high blood pressure. But he had a routine. A morning walk, his own meals, quiet evenings with the radio. His son Mark, though, worried constantly. "Dad, you need help," he'd say. "It's not safe anymore." Eventually, Leonard gave in and moved in with Mark's family. That's when things started to fall apart. Leonard's routine, gone. He couldn't take his morning walk because Mark didn't want him going out alone. Meals were late, based on the kids' schedules. His medication got off track. The house was noisy, chaotic. Sleep became a problem. His blood pressure shot up. His arthritis got worse from lack of movement. Within 6 months, Leonard had his first stroke. His doctor later told him that the move likely triggered a cascade of stress-related issues that his body simply couldn't keep up with. And again, Mark wasn't trying to hurt his dad. He was trying to help. But the truth is, moving into someone else's life, especially when that life is full of activity, noise, and change, can be more destabilizing than supportive. As we get older, routine becomes a form of medicine. The predictability of your day helps regulate everything: your heart, your mind, your emotions. When that rhythm is broken, your health often suffers in ways you don't notice right away. It might be subtle at first, feeling tired, forgetting a few things, getting irritated more easily, but it builds. Your home is your healing space. When you give it up, you give up control. And that control is what allows you to manage your health, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally too. So if your goal is to stay healthy for as long as possible, the best thing you can do might not be moving in with family, but staying where you can stick to your rhythms, your routines, your care plan. And if you do need support, bring it in on your terms: a home aide, a visiting nurse, meals delivered. There are so many ways to get help without giving up your space. Now, I want to take a moment and speak to something very few people want to admit, but you need to hear it. Sometimes moving in with your kids opens the door to something far worse than stress or awkwardness. It opens the door to being taken advantage of. We don't like to think about that. We tell ourselves, my kids would never do that. And most wouldn't. But here's the truth. The majority of elder abuse cases in the US, especially financial abuse, don't come from strangers. They come from family members, usually the ones we trust the most. And it doesn't always start with something obvious. Sometimes it's as simple as, "Let me help you with your bills." Or, "Why don't we just put your name and mine on the account?" Or, "Sign this form just in case something happens to you." Before you know it, the car is sold, the savings account is drained, and the house has someone else's name on the deed. And you didn't even realize it was happening until it was far too late. That's exactly what happened to Carol. At 77, she moved in with her son Daniel after recovering from pneumonia. She trusted him completely. She added him to her bank account, just in case. She signed a power of attorney Daniel's friend had drawn up. No lawyer involved. And when she found out Daniel had sold part of her antique collection without telling her, she was heartbroken. But it got worse. He'd refinanced the home she had transferred to him. She had no idea. Now she couldn't move out, couldn't reclaim her assets, and felt trapped in her own life. This wasn't a stranger scamming her over the phone. This was her son. And once again, he didn't start out with bad intentions. But money has a strange way of changing people, especially when there's stress, pressure, or entitlement involved. This isn't about fear. It's about preparation, about protecting yourself, legally and emotionally, and about making sure that the people who love you can never accidentally put you in a situation you can't get out of. So how do you protect yourself from something like that? It starts with understanding that love and legal clarity can, and must, go hand in hand. Wanting to keep things simple is understandable, but the truth is, not having things in writing creates confusion. And in some cases, it creates the perfect storm for unintentional harm. If you're thinking about living with your kids, or if you already are, take this one step seriously. Talk to a certified elder law attorney. Not just any attorney. Someone who specializes in senior rights and estate protection. They can help you draft agreements, set up boundaries, and make sure your finances and property are safeguarded, not just for now, but for the years ahead. You can also set up what's called a personal care agreement if your kids are helping you out regularly. This is a written understanding of what you're contributing, whether it's financial or caregiving related, and what they're providing in return. That way, there are no surprises, no confusion, no misunderstandings that can slowly turn into resentment or regret. Remember, legal protection isn't about distrust, it's about clarity. It allows your family to love you without being entangled in difficult choices or blurred lines. It protects them just as much as it protects you. And more than anything, it protects your peace. I know by now you might be thinking, but what's the alternative? I don't want to be isolated. I don't want to be in some facility. I don't want to feel forgotten. And I hear you. I truly do. Staying independent doesn't mean staying alone. It doesn't mean cutting ties. It means choosing how those ties are kept strong, on your terms. Whether that means finding a cozy apartment near your daughter's house, or a vibrant independent living community with your own front door, your own kitchen, and your own space to breathe, you do have options. There are so many wonderful communities these days designed for active seniors. Not sterile, gloomy buildings like the ones we used to imagine, but bright, welcoming spaces with gardens, group activities, shared meals, when you want them, and freedom. Freedom to see your grandkids and come home to your own sanctuary. Freedom to say no thank you to noise, chaos, or expectations. Freedom to protect your identity, your routine, and your emotional well-being. And if money is a concern, and let's be honest, for many of us it is, there are resources. Subsidized housing for seniors, shared housing programs where you can live with another senior and split the costs, or even government assistance to help cover in-home services. You don't have to navigate these options alone. Your local senior center, area agency on aging, or elder law office can help guide you through it all. You deserve to know what's out there before making any decision that could change your life. Now, let's take a breath and look back, because this hasn't been an easy conversation. We've talked about some heavy things that may have brought up your own fears, or memories, or even guilt. But if you've made it this far, I want you to hear this from me. You are not too late. You haven't failed. And you are not selfish for wanting a safe, peaceful, and dignified life as you age. You've spent decades taking care of others, your children, your spouse, your community. This is your time to take care of yourself. Not because you're giving up on anyone else, but because you still have a life worth living on your own terms. And now that you know the risks, financial strain, loss of independence, damaged relationships, declining health, and legal vulnerability. You also know how to protect yourself from them. Stay in control of your money. Keep your name on your assets. Don't sign anything without legal advice from someone who specializes in elder law. Choose your living space based on your needs, not someone else's convenience. And most importantly, trust your instincts. If something doesn't feel right, you're allowed to say no. Let your family know that you love them deeply, but your independence isn't negotiable. And you'd rather visit them with a smile and a clear heart than move in and risk losing the bond you've built together. You don't need to justify that. You just need to stand by it. If this message speaks to you, if you've ever felt pressured or unsure or alone in trying to make this decision, leave a comment below. Tell me your story. Or just say hi. I read every single one. And I promise, if you speak from the heart, you'll be surprised how many others out there feel the exact same way you do. If this video helped you, please click that like button. It lets YouTube know that more people need to see this. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. We talk about the things no one else wants to talk about. Aging with grace, with strength, and with real honesty. You're not alone in this journey. Here's to you. To your courage, your wisdom, and your right to choose a life that fits you, not someone else's expectations. Here's to boundaries that protect, relationships that thrive, and golden years that actually feel golden. You've earned it. And I'm cheering you on every step of the way.